we talked about the concept of experts and how the definition of experts is, I don't know if the right way to say it is we're being called into question predictions and from experts they're not always playing out, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, if you could.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I think what's become quite interesting, because experts have got a rather bad press lately, is I think actually what's happening is that the world is becoming harder and harder to forecast. And there are very good reasons for this. Essentially, we've moved from a world that was complicated, which means it's sort of linear. Patterns repeat themselves predictably. It was a world that was very receptive to efficiency. That world has kind of gradually given way to a world that's complex, which means that you might have patterns, but they don't repeat predictably. It means that very small things can make a gigantic impact. And it means that expertise isn't always all it's cracked up to be, because things change so fast. And in general, we've moved from complicated to complex because of globalization and pervasive communications technologies. And so one way I always think about this is if you compare the two wars in Iraq, the first one was complicated. It was meticulously planned. It was executed by the book. It was superbly efficient, and it was effective. And the second Iraq war, by then, of course, we had the internet, we had globalization, and it was wildly complex, by which I mean an extremely well-planned, well-armed, if you like, traditional army could be completely blindsided by a kid with a cell phone. And, so that's an example of the difference between complicated and complex. And in the business environment, you can think of it also as, you can have a fantastic marketing campaign, but you could also find that, as I did with one business I work with, 50% of their sales vanished overnight because of a stinking review on Amazon. So this is a very different environment. And what it doesn't mean that expertise doesn't matter, which is how some people have liked to describe it. Expertise still matters. You still need, scientists. You still need engineers. You still need qualified accountants. But there may be circumstances in which you need more than that. You need more perspectives and a broader range of options. Now, when it comes to forecasting, what this shift from complicated to complex means is that forecasting has got a great deal harder. And of course, we've seen this recently with the pandemic, which is lots of people could have told you, and indeed did tell me 2 years ago when I was working on my new book, epidemics are always with us. But what they could not tell you at that point was when the next epidemic would break out, or where, or what the disease would be. So these are events that they describe as generally certain, but specifically ambiguous. These are really, until they're pretty much at your front door, virtually impossible to forecast. There's another thing that's become quite interesting, which is that experts who have been studying forecasting have found that the more famous the forecaster, the more likely they are to be wrong.
Oh, no.
And this is really interesting because why? And the answer is because the forecaster becomes famous for his or her kind of central big ideas. That becomes kind of part of their brand. Tom Friedman becomes famous for the sort of world is flat globalization mindset. Economists become famous for their particular belief in certain theories. So Alan Greenspan, very famous for believing that deregulated markets are the safest markets. And as they acquire fame and fortune and prominence with these big ideas, they don't change them because that's part of who they are. But when the world changes, they miss it because it doesn't fit in with their big idea. And so they become rather fixed while the world remains very volatile. And so the fame of the forecaster is probably a counter indicator
Okay.
to accuracy.